was a Spanish philosopher. I didn't know he wrote poetry. And he tells us in times like this, shake off this sadness and recover your spirit. Sluggish, you will never see the wheel of fate that brushes your heel as it goes by. The man who wants to live is the man in whom life is abundant. Now you are only giving food to that final pain, which is slowly winding you in the nets of death. But to live is to work, and the only thing which lasts is the work. Start then and turn to the work. So what is the work, he says? Throw yourself like a seed as you walk and into your own field. Don't turn your face, for that would be to turn to death. And do not let the past weigh down your motion. Leave what is alive in you in the furrow. What's dead in yourself? For life does not move in the same way as a group of clouds. From your work, you will be able one day to gather yourself. And so he's reminding us that there's a tendency to want to turn aside, a tendency to uh, get lost and buried in the losses that we go through every day. Grieving is, to me, a fundamental art, and the only way we survive what the world throws at us is that transition from loss and feeling the intensity of that loss back to reinvesting and putting ourselves out in the world. So today we're going to look again at the default position of the brain, and we're going to look at how that particular part of our brain keeps us from making that investment. Again, for those of you who missed last week, this is a part of your brain that gets activated when you're not doing anything else. And we talked last time about the four specific functions. One is to say life should be this way, it shouldn't be this way. Well, that's very much a part of the bargaining stage of grief. And when we're sitting there trying to figure about how our life should have been or could have been or ought to be, we're in this part of our brain. It goes past to the future. It's always trying to create a coherent narrative and storyline of our life. It's trying to define how we are in response to the things around us. It's always looking at our relationship to other people and how we are. Now, some of that stuff is good. A lot of it is beneficial. What's not beneficial is when that part of your brain takes over. So, what we're going to hear today is what the wisdom traditions have to say about this part of the brain. So, again, we're going to turn to Kelly McGonigal and hear what she has to say. I think she puts things beautifully in a way that's accessible, at least to me. So, Linnell, you're
We're going to
okay.
the
We're
other
going
room?
the other room. Okay.
Yes, we are. All right. All right. Andy's already here. Oh, could you grab the speaker? Thank you. I may have to go in the other room to connect my device.
I've got here.
No,
I'll just
don't.
take my.
No.
You could no. I take my phone out of here.
Well, it's too late. Maybe. Hopefully that's it. All right. Good.
I'm sorry I mistimed this.
Why? You're good. All right. So
the teaching this morning. Last week we covered the default state of the brain and the 4 mental activities of the mind. Okay, do you need to review those?
I just did.
You just did. Okay, so now we're moving on to a section titled Sources of Our Suffering. Okay.
When we turn to the wisdom traditions, we see a very different kind of interpretation of this default mindset or this default mode. And the wisdom traditions teach us that actually all of this activity of the default mode, all of these mental processes are actually a big source of suffering in our lives. And while they may provide some survival value, they also create unnecessary stress in our lives and unnecessary suffering. And let's think about that for a moment. So if part of our default mindset is to have an inner commentary on the present moment, and particularly one that is looking for what is wrong or what could be improved, you can immediately sense how that could create a lot of suffering in our lives. And you've probably had this experience, even just in the last 10 minutes. You probably had some sort of thought about how if one small thing were changed in your environment right now, you'd be a little bit more comfortable. Things would be a little bit better. And the fact that we have that kind of sense of dissatisfaction all the time, every waking moment, is really a big source of suffering. That we never have that moment of true peace, that every time the mind falls into this distraction, what it's pointing us towards is unhappiness. And why would time traveling create suffering? Sometimes it's nice to think about things that happened in the past or fantasize about the future. But what the wisdom traditions teach us is that every time we escape the present moment to think about the past or to think about the future, we're reinforcing the subtle sense of dissatisfaction, and we're losing some of the vitality and the vibrancy of actual life. That we're creating a kind of barrier between the full experience of life that we could be having and escaping out of it into something that is much less satisfying and much less rewarding. Sometimes it's a little bit more tricky to think about how creating a sense of self can lead to suffering, because many of us are quite attached to the idea of who we are. We like thinking that I'm the kind of person who does this and likes this and doesn't like this, because that is how we know who we are. And we tend to think of ourselves as having a fixed set of abilities and preferences and qualities and talents and desires. And every time we strengthen that, we feel a little bit more comfortable. We feel like we know who we are. And yet what the wisdom traditions teach us is that creating that solid, rigid sense of self distances us from others and from the present moment. So if we believe we are the kind of person who, fill in the blank, and something challenges that, maybe somebody says something that we disagree with, or we receive criticism, or we experience failure, then we feel personally threatened. And we feel threatened because we believe that who we are is a certain way. And when reality doesn't conform with that, we feel the need to defend this set sense of self, of who we are. And constantly thinking about others and what others think of us and comparing ourselves to others, again, it really creates a sense of separation from others. The wisdom traditions teach us that freedom from suffering comes from feeling connected to others, from seeing what is common between all of us, what is common among all of us. And yet, in the default state, we tend to actually do the opposite. We're constantly looking for what distinguishes us from others. And that's part of building up the sense of self so that we feel good about ourselves and we feel like we know who we are. In order to do that, we have to tell ourselves that we are fundamentally different from other humans. And this can become a very big problem, especially when we experience things like failure or anger or anxiety or any kind of experience where then if we feel like it's just us, if this is uniquely us, we can start to feel as though we are fundamentally broken because we've spent so much time denying the reality of the fact that actually we are very similar to others and that a lot of these differences that we create in our mind are just that. They are mental constructs and they don't say anything that is true about who we are and how other people are different from us or what other people think about us. It's not just the wisdom traditions that teach us that living in this default state is suffering. Neuroscientists have also looked at who it is that spends the most time stuck in the default state. And scientists have found that people who are depressed have a much harder time.
Okay, we're going to save that for next week. So the takeaway on this is to begin, and what we're going to do in our meditation today is to begin to note when these activities show up in your mind, in your thought processes. When, as we said, when you sit down to meditate and you're not doing anything, not actively engaged in an external process, the default mode is going to get activated. Most of us think that that's why we're not good at meditating. No, that's going to happen to everybody. You look at someone like Brad or me, been meditating for 50 years, it still happens to us, okay? Because that is when it gets activated, when we're doing nothing. Learning to see how we get ensnared. So the Buddhists use the word shenpa. In Tibetan Buddhism, it means a stickiness. It means when you get into these things, you get stuck. It becomes a rabbit hole, and it becomes difficult to extricate yourself from it. So one aspect of this to look for is the critical mind, the judge who's saying things shouldn't be this way, they should be this way. Watch yourself with arguments that you have with other people and with the world, trying to get the world to conform to your view of how it should or shouldn't be, okay? So that's one aspect to look for. Another aspect to begin to look for is the time travel. The thing about the time travel from past to future is that it's often simultaneous, that there's a projection room, it's literally called the projection room, where we're looking at past experience and projecting scenarios in the future where that might reoccur and how we're going to address them. So all of this thing that people think of as constructive planning for their future is actually your brain rehearsing for catastrophic scenarios, and it generally only comes up with catastrophic conclusions because it doesn't have positive information. This part of your brain is disconnected from positive and neutral experiences. So watch that so-called planning aspect of the
And Walt
brain.
Whitman had that great quote about spending so much time with things that never
happened.
happen.
Well, Mark Twain said something similar.
Yeah.
about,
Maybe it was Mark Twain.
I've fought 1,000 battles, most of which never happened. So there are a lot of people who notice this tendency of the mind. The third one is one the Buddha say, give it up. Who am I? What kind of person am I? Defining the ego. So you want to watch how we're constantly looking at all this phenomenon that unfolds and trying to see what aspect of it is me instead of understanding the true self is the part watching this drama unfolding. You're not what you're looking at. You're what's standing back here looking at it. But we're sitting here so concerned and going to war with everybody who disagrees with our perception of ourselves. So begin to watch that defense, what Buddhists call the ego. And then the other is worrying about other people, what they think about me, what they feel about me. how they're being impacted. Are they doing well? Um, do I need to give them a call? Do I need to apologize? All this self-referential thinking. And you begin to see how much of your headspace gets taken up. And once you're in there, how hard it is to extricate yourself. And that's because this is suffering. And suffering means that you're going to release stress hormones. And it means that the stress hormones are addictive. You're going to release adrenaline, you're going to release cortisol. And in many ways, what we found neurologically is that that creates a sense of safety. So we have a sense of safety being locked into a mental construct that is actively creating suffering for us. Do you hear that?
That's hard to believe, but
But neurologically, we can
Yeah.
watch it happen so that when someone gets into a clear place, they actually feel threatened. Why do they feel threatened? Because they don't feel that sense of anxiety. It's like, what's going on? What's happening? What could go wrong? In and of itself, that absence of threat becomes a threat. Oh no, can I get
or
any
that a
hands on
threat
that?
is probably going
But
to
probably
show
going to
up.
happen, right? So that the silence, the quiet becomes threatening.
Well, sometimes you're in a space that's so pleasant and wonderful and ideal, and that thought does come up. That, oh, I'll never be able to sustain this because this will happen. or
Monkey
this-
mind jumps in,
Yeah.
starts tearing it down. So you need a sense of humor. Do not go into this exercise without a sense of humor. So I say, sit back and watch the shit show. If you aren't creating it, you're not responsible for it. It's been going on. Yes, you've reinforced it.
It is
It's been
the brain.
It is the brain doing what the brain does. Now we need to begin to have a skillful relationship to this part of our brain and to identify the very thing that tells us it's our savior, because I'm constantly scanning the environment for potential threats
Yes.
and preparing you to have appropriate action is actually the reason you can't ever be satisfied with this moment right now. It keeps you disconnected from it. So the beauty of this is that neuroscience has identified what's happening in the brain. It's not neuroses. We're going to hear about how it historically and evolutionarily developed, but there are alternative ways of living, which we're going to get to, so be patient. To land in what's called the experiential part of the brain. And as I say, we'll get to that. So let's start with our meditation.
And Bart is going to somewhat guide us, but there will be some free, clear meditation space in which you could possibly watch
Yeah, where I'm going to invite you to see it.
at work this monkey mind, and
And
then
just tune in and see what aspect of it was manifesting
Right.
when I interrupt. Is
And-
that Casey? Matthew? Hey, Casey. Good to see you.
and
Cut
Guy,
your hair.
Yes. Oh,
Ginger. Wow.
yeah.
So yeah, watch the monkey mind. We know from our teachings the way out, and Bart will chime in every now and again to
Act as a witness. So all I'm doing in guiding you is showing what you eventually will internalize. At one point, you had no inner judge. You got your inner judge because people shamed you, and then you learned to internalize that, see the world as that is a possibility, and judging yourself whenever things happen again that have not worked out for you in the past. Well, just like you internalize that, we're internalizing witness consciousness, which helps us notice you just got stuck in the muck. You hooked to tar, baby, right now. The harder you fight it, the more stuck you're going to get. So just take a step back, take a deep breath, realize what it is, don't fight it, it is going to disappear because all phenomena are impermanent. You have never had the same thought for 2 days in a row. Okay, never had the same emotion 2 days in a row. It's always interrupted, always changing. Your brain tells you it's always going to be like, it's not always going to be like this. So sit back, enjoy the shit show. It's your own personal shit show. You know, look at how creative you are. So. So allow your breath to settle into its natural rhythm, softening the belly, creating room for diaphragmatic breathing. Taking refuge in the breath. Feeling the sensations that are most pronounced, that are associated with breathing, the nostrils, tip of the nose, upper lip, sinuses. Not thinking the breath. Simply allowing it to flow. Turning it over to the wisdom of your body that breathes all night without any effort on your part. And then sit back and watch the breath. And using the breath and the sensations as an anchor to the present moment. Allow yourself to let go of all striving, any attempt to understand what you're experiencing. And simply allow the mind to unfold. There's no right way to do this, no wrong way to do this. Simply awareness meeting sensation in the present. Just take a moment to drop in and ask, where was I? Was I in the past? Was I in the future? If I was in the present, was I resisting something or clinging to something? Was I thinking about how to handle a situation in my life? Thinking about something someone said or something I need to say? Just recognize it as monkey mind. Return the focus to the breath. And again, take a step back. Notice where the monkey was, perhaps describing your experience to you, like you need a narrator. Perhaps a part that was congratulating you because you're being so quiet. Perhaps from the judge, worried about whether you're doing it right. Wondering how much longer we have to go, whether your knees are going to make it. Come back to the breath, gently, without criticism, and watch the show. Again, take a step back. Notice if your mind is maybe thinking about a book you've read or something that you saw on TV. Thinking about what you're going to do when you're done here, what you're going to eat. Notice the monitoring commentary on your state of your mental health, your physical health, the health of people around you. And again, whatever it is, bring yourself back. Let it go. Again, stepping back. Notice where your mind was. Notice your body. Notice particularly any areas that are starting to cry out. Notice how the mind tends to increase the suffering by telling a storyline that I'm never going to get the feeling back in my feet again. I've done it to myself. My back's killing me. I don't think I can make it another 5 minutes. Watch the urgency that arises around any discomfort. As the body begins to become unstable, the mind begins to become unstable. But you learn a lot in these last few minutes watching the resistances arise uninvited time becomes compressed. Spaciousness gets lost. Let yourself expand back out with the breath. Back in the present moment. Just watching without criticism or judgment. Things just as they are. No meaning. Lost Bruce. So, questions, comments?
Just unmute yourselves.
Bart, I was watching Andrew Huberman, who's out of Stanford. He usually does anatomy and physiology in general, but he's gotten onto mental states recently. And he was saying there's like a two-step process that you can initiate that'll really help you out. The first one is to see any thought that occurs to you as not a fact, but just a thought. It's something the brain generates.
Yep.
And for most people, the brain generates kind of critical, chasing yourself kind of thoughts. And he says, so first thing is to say, that's not a fact. That's just my thought coming along here. Then he says,
Brain fart.
Pardon?
I said it's a brain fart.
Yeah, right. Well, then he has an interesting second point to make about it. He said they're zeroing in on a very small part of the brain that has to do with our willpower. And he recommends that once you've dismissed a thought and got some distance from it, that you replace it with something that's going to help you and deliberately say in the second, like Bart would say, Bart, you're not an asshole. You're a good guy and you've got this. And you would say that. And every time a negative thought would pop up in your brain for 3 days, he says, every single time, replace that thought with that second person talking to yourself technique in order to ensconce neural connections between our prefrontals and our amygdala to calm it down and
Right.
create an avenue so that we can enjoy more positive thoughts about ourselves.
Absolutely. And thank you for pointing that out, Brad, because we think of self-esteem as a noun. Do I have self-esteem? I mean, show me your fucking self-esteem. It's not a noun, it's a process. And we do the exact opposite of self-esteem. We do self-judgment, self-hate all day long. So the beauty of what you're doing, and I recommend in the morning, 5 things you're grateful for, 5 things you appreciate about yourself, which is similar to what he's saying. I appreciate that I care enough to reach out to someone. I appreciate that I, do something the minute I see that it needs to be done instead of procrastinating. Just little things. But that connection he's talking about, the amygdala is the center that's generating all of this negativity. All right. It's where traumatic memory is stored. That's why trauma psychology was so pivotal in us looking at the brain and beginning to see its role in so many aspects of our life that therapy wasn't able to treat. And it's because even talk therapy reinforces those neural pathways and keeps them open and keeps the past alive to you in the present moment. So this new style of therapy that Brad's talking about is different from affirmations like Stuart Smalley. Gosh darn it, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and people just like me. And you can tell there's nothing in him that believes that. Okay? And so we're not trying to say something that's just a pleasant thought that we wish was true. This is what Tara Brach calls finding your gold. Finding your gold, finding your worth, and ask people. Here's something that we used to do. If you don't see your gold, ask people, say, what is it that you see in me that you value? Other people saw so much in me I couldn't see for myself, and it took courage to claim it. All right, but my self-hate was so great I couldn't even think of anything. So if you can't find people who love you and you can't figure out why they do, and ask them, why do you love me? What is it you see in me? Does that make sense to people? Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, Brad. Huberman's also a good guy to look at. Again, Stanford, a lot of the good guys. What's his name who wrote Buddha's Brain? Rick Hanson.
I know, and he had a similar thing in Buddha's Brain.
Right.
About replacing the negative loops that you continually find yourself in with a positive.
And that goes to the third thing, which is glimmers, which is remembering times when I work with my people and they get a compliment, says something good, write that down. And when you're stuck in dorsal and you think you're a piece of shit, remember how you feel right now when this person told you how great you are. So, remembering the birth of your child, or remembering the wonderful trip in nature that you had, recalling those are moments of closeness with loved ones that are transcendent when you felt the goodness of life directly. Recall those, bring those forward, because your brain isn't going to do it naturally. It's going to bring the negativity forward because it's a defense mechanism. Okay.
I think he equated this center of willpower with the practice of meditation.
Yes.
That when we are able to say, oh, there's a thought, let it dissolve, we're exercising that willpower. And similarly, to make it positive, to say, yeah, Bart, you've got this.
Yep.
Thank you, Bart, for this Sangha group. And Linnell, I tell myself that I'm not very good at anything and that I don't follow through with anything. But the fact is I think I've been doing this nearly 2 years and I don't hardly miss it, and I love it. I mean, nobody has to tell me, oh, you better get on your meditation group or I automatically want to do it.
Yes.
And I love it. And what I found when we were meditating was the first thing that happened was I heard the air conditioner go on and the rattling of the vents. And then my brain went, fuck, we need to change the filters. And we don't have any filters. So that fucking means I have to go buy them, measure them, figure out which size I need. And then I started laughing at myself.
Great.
And then I thought I have this keen sense of hearing, and when they test my hearing, they are appalled at how they can't believe how good my hearing is. And I developed it as a little girl when my dad, anyway, I had to be hyper vigilant with sound because my dad thought it was funny to crawl around on the floor and scare me when I was a little girl. And so my sense, I always want to cry when I say that because I was so little.
Yeah.
And I had to develop that, I thought, because if I could anticipate it happening, then maybe it wouldn't happen. And so that's where my thought and worrying would come in. And I mean, that's been hardwired. And so then I hear Dean in the kitchen rattling something. And I tried my best to keep my mouth shut. And I knew what it was. He was getting something out of a jar, and he kept rattling it. I finally said, "What the fuck are you doing?" I couldn't keep my mouth shut. But
right after you and I talked about, does it come in to bother you, or do you go out to bother the truck? Right. So perfect.
Anyway, I found humor,
Good.
which I love.
Critical thing to have to be able to survive what you're going to find out about yourself. So Trungpa had a wonderful saying. He said, it's almost impossible for you to think a thought that isn't related to your defense. All right. And the thing that you again pointed to is we've hardwired that. So with neuroplasticity, you think that it's innocent to sit and replay these thoughts. And what connects what you're saying and what Brad just said is that every thought you think starts hardwiring it. So if you think these negative thoughts repeatedly, you hardwired that into your brain. That is really hard to undo, people. Okay? It is really hard to undo it once you've got it hardwired. So we need to be very patient. So what we're really doing, and she's going to talk about this later on, is the more you exercise your will and strengthen your will to stay in the present. So the name for where we are trying to move to is the experiential network of the brain. That's the one that experiences everything directly without commentary.
The sounds.
Like sounds, like what's coming in through your senses without analysis. We begin to hardwire that can become your default setting. Okay? Which is what the practice is when you begin to live a lifestyle that's more ventral than in fight or flight or dorsal. So again, you begin where you are. You're going to wake up either scared all the time, and we're going to talk about that, and constantly looking for threat and planning ways to deal with it, or we're depressed, withdrawn, see no reason to continue, think we're a piece of shit, or both. I diversified my portfolio. I loved living in both of those places. I love being angry. Is so much easier than being sad and worthless. But there was a comfort in that too. So these places are all we've known, and moving into these other realms, learning to get there. As I said, I wish I could say that we immediately go like Beth, oh, I want to get that. No, it takes time. It's uncomfortable at first to be in the silence, to be in the open space, to be without the dialogue in the head that, it's like a wind blowing on you. You didn't know it was blowing till it stopped and you go, whoa.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was anybody else. Tommy?
Tom.
I just wanted to say that these positive thoughts that Brad talked about and that you've talked about, and that we cultivate sitting in meditation, they're also hard to get rid of once you wire your brain that way. And that's the point of meditation, it seems to me, is to rewire our brain so that it doesn't dwell on the negative past and future, and it dwells on the positives, and those become wired in and hard to get rid of, and that's what we're looking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you're in ventral, you don't question your worth. Notice that. When you're out in nature, beautiful experience, or with your someone that you're having a really deep conversation with, do you ever go, I'm unworthy? I don't deserve this? No. You're nodding your head, Woody. That's when you've stepped outside of it. I'm saying when you're actually in the flow of it, does that happen? Because for most of us, it doesn't. Afterwards, yes, we'll question our worthiness. Go
The
ahead.
ventral, as a review, is that calm, clear, good part of your nervous
The
system,
vagus nerve,
of the vagus
parasympathetic.
nerve system, that we would like to spend the largest percentage of our time.
Okay, so when you think about the myth of the Garden of Eden, look at children. When they're born ventral. Okay, that's why Jesus says, look at children, consider the beasts, consider the flowers. What is it that they're not doing that we do? And they're in that part of their nervous system where they're curious, okay? Symptoms of ventral. Curious, expansive, full of possibilities, feel at home, feel worthy, feel hopeful, feel energetic, expansive, okay? So the more we get wounded as kids, the more we move out of that part of our nervous system into the amygdala that Brad was talking about. We get more and more traumatized. The amygdala is storing all these memories. Now, anytime anything in the environment reminds you of a pattern that you've experienced in the past, it immediately sends a signal to your adrenal glands. Takes a half a second for this interaction to happen. Goes from the amygdala to the pituitary to the thalamus to the adrenal gland. Now I'm in full-blown fight or flight. Never has gone past my cortex. No chance of controlling it. Now my whole worldview is gone. I'm no longer up here feeling free. Now I feel like I'm under siege and under attack. Does that make sense? So that shift is happening in us. Take a look at it. You know, here's mine. Walk out the door, excited about my day, look down, and I've got food on my shirt. What happens?
Shame spiral.
Shame spiral. Yeah, yeah. You can't go out looking like that. You got to go and change your jet. Now I'm going to be late. Bow. The hate starts. So begin to play with this stuff. Watch how it gets activated. Don't just believe my words because I've said it or because some Stanford guy is doing science on it. Watch it happen.
On that thought replacement stuff, I've heard someone say about the on-ramp to it. Like if you can't believe that you're a 10 out of 10 because you believe that you're a 0, then start at like 3 out of 10. And when you get comfortable believing that you're a 3 out of 10, go to 5 out of 10. And when you get comfortable because like you say, if it's too far away from your current belief system, it becomes those Stuart Smalley after affirmations. Like there's an on-ramp.
Right. So
Love
again, stay with what you know to be true. All right.
All I need it to get to my ventral state is to watch Kat Howard and her dog.
Yes.
Especially when she has it up by her face and the dog just leans into her face. Oh my,
I know.
it's beautiful. Yeah.
Okay, so right now her dog is our Sat Guru.
Yep.
There's where we want to be. And the dog is saying, hey, Mom, you could really use some of my energy. And she's probably gone to a chakra right now. The cat needs a little bit of good energy on and is sharing her animal warmth and energy to help her heal. So they're
love it.
wonderful.
Yep.
Yeah. Watch them. Good
Thank you
watching.
for
Like
that.
that. Okay. Omi,
Okay.
y'all have been wonderful. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for showing up. Okay? Just like that. Someone got probably. Is it
Sandy.
Sandy's trying to
somebody?
try.
Oh well. Let's open them up.
Breath in.
The.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good week.
I like the echoing on.
Yeah, the echoing.
The British flavor.